Well, the Prime Minister is going to be speaking at the United Nations General Assembly in New York before returning home. That's later in the week. But he's decided not to attend the special UN climate summit that's taking place there tomorrow. He's not the only leader who won't be taking part in this climate summit. Speaking spots were apparently reserved only for those willing to make new commitments. And the one thing the Morrison government has made very clear is that it won't be lifting its level of ambition when it comes to reducing emissions. Coinciding with this climate summit at the UN, a new report's been released by the World Meteorological Organization, which finds the past 5 years have been the hottest 5-year period on record. The global average temperature increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial period, and it says the world will need to commit to a collective 5-fold increase in its targets to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. The report says last year saw the largest number of tropical cyclones since 2000, and large parts of Africa, Central America and Australia have experienced more frequent droughts over the past 4 years. Well, in light of this report, the Australian government is today defending its plans when it comes to tackling climate change and lowering emissions. Here was the Minister for Emissions Reduction talking to Sky News this afternoon.
So I've never doubted that our climate has been changing in recent years. I farm and my family's farmed for many, many generations, and we do think that there is some change in the weather patterns. There's no doubt about that. Look, the crucial issue here, though, is what action should be taken and what impact can Australia have. It's a global problem. It requires a globally coordinated solution. We think we've got to do our bit, but as part of a globally coordinated solution, and that means sensible policies that don't trash the economy.
Whether it's linked to climate change or not, the current drought is biting hard across New South Wales and parts of Victoria. Today, Angus Taylor and his colleague, Agriculture Minister Bridget McKenzie, alongside Tony Mahar from the National Farmers Federation, launched a new report. You might have seen in Eliza's piece there a little earlier. This report is aimed at helping farmers lower their own emissions and lower their own power bills. The report's been put together by the National Farmers Federation and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Tony Mahar from the NFF joins me now. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. So the report's called Transforming Australian Agriculture with Clean Energy. Recommendation number 1 is do an energy audit, right, on your property, find out exactly what you're using and why. The second recommendation is, quote, generate your own energy, so with solar, wind or biofuels. So are renewables the answer for farmers now rather than solely relying on the grid?
I think they're part of the answer. I think they have been part of the answer for some time. But you're right, the first instance, any business, but a farm business in this case, needs to look at what power it's using, what energy it's using, and see where the opportunities are. So if that's new investment in solar or wind technology, and the technology is getting much cheaper and much more accessible now, and farmers are often well placed to actually put solar or wind products or generation on their property.
Does it depend on the size and scale of the farm right now? I mean, is it clear that it is going to be a worthwhile investment to, put in some solar panels or wind power?
Oh, look, you're absolutely right. Depends on where you are and what sort of topography and, what business you're in and how much energy you actually use. So if you look at like dairy or pork or horticulture, high users of energy for heating and cooling. So, some of this small cell technology can actually help. If you're a broadacre farmer, I know there's a big solar farm outside Canberra, in fact, but also in places like Longreach. They've got the scale and the capacity where they can invest in some of this technology, and it helps that business, but also in places like Longreach, helps the rural communities.
Yeah, and I mean, the wind farm debate continues, doesn't it, about, whether this is a good idea for farmers or not. I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, I think our view is that it's up to the individual farmer and to make those decisions, and obviously they live in a community and they have to take those community views into concern. Neighbours possibly at times have different views on wind farms and things. Depends on your literal perspective there. You can be looking out and see these wind turbines and things, and some people think they're not too much of a bother. Others are quite concerned about them. So the way we approach it is farm businesses got those opportunities. They should be able to make those decisions and, they have to live in the community.
The report also recommends farmers upgrade their farm vehicles, so tractors and so on, to something more newer, something more efficient, more fuel efficient. How viable is that? It's not exactly a cheap option, is it, to go out and buy a brand new tractor?
No, certainly not in the current conditions. Many farmers facing severe financial hardship because of the drought and other issues. But I think regularly looking at your business and looking at your infrastructure and your machinery and equipment, it's timely to sort of say at the right time to invest, whether there's the return on investment, what the payoff period's going to be. So I think any business does that. But farm machinery can use a lot of energy. And in fact, not just the machinery, but the equipment. Again, if we're talking about cooling sheds or dairy operations or heating for chicken farming or dairy, I mean, it's an option and it should always be.
I mean, one of the other recommendations too talks about robots, whether it's picking fruit or driverless tractors, unmanned drones and so on big properties. Again, none of this is cheap. I mean, sure, it's going to ultimately save you money on your power bill, but you've got to be able to get there first, and a lot of farmers can't.
That's right. And so it's getting cheaper and getting more accessible, but it's still going to be, in many cases, quite a large investment. Yeah. And a lot of the times also associated conversation is the technology, the coverage, the digital capacity of that farm or that region to actually run some of these AI technologies and new technologies. The technology is getting great, and getting more accessible, as I say, but you've actually got to have the coverage in a lot of cases to actually enable it.
The farmers doing it the toughest right now are clearly those in the drought-affected areas of New South Wales, parts of Queensland, parts of Victoria as well. We've seen a lot of political argy-bargy over this, but what's your view on what these farmers need, apart from rain, need most right now?
I think in the very first instance, they need to be recognised and they need to be heard and they need to know that people are understanding the challenges that they're going through. I think that's a really critical part of the conversation.
You think that's not happening right now?
I think it needs to happen a little bit more. This drought has been going on for a number of years in a number of regions, and almost 12 months ago there was a bit of a frenzy around, recognising the drought and lots of donations, which was great. Here we are 12 months on, and some of these people, their conditions have gotten worse. So as we, scarily say we're getting into end of the year and into Christmas and these sorts of things, those concerns, those challenges that those farmers are facing are being exacerbated and
this
compounded.
Is going to be a pretty bad summer, right?
And that's the other factor, is that it doesn't look very good going forward. And so people are now saying, well, OK, we're waiting for spring rains, winter rains, they haven't eventuated, crops failing for another year, I'm going to cut some hay, maybe I can recoup some of my costs. But some of these farmers, putting in millions and millions of dollars worth of inputs and they're just seeing them not come to fruition. So I think some of the angst and the anxiety is now building up, and we're now sort of saying to government, OK, what's next? What is next to help these people through what does look like a continuing troubling times?
I mean, it raises the question, how far should the government go in helping if some of these areas are simply becoming unsustainable? And I was having this discussion with Joel Fitzgibbon yesterday on air about, parts of the country that are becoming less sustainable for farming. I mean, what's your view on that?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, and it depends on how the business is operating, what decisions they've made, what capacity they have to sustain themselves through, another year or so of drought conditions, and that will vary from business to business and region to region. So we have been talking to government about what other measures are going to be on the table. There has been, in the past, exit packages, for those farmers that have made the decision that maybe it is too tough for them.
Do we need to go down that path again?
I think everything needs to be on the table. I think we actually have to say, is there a proportion of farmers out there, farm businesses out there that are making those decisions to say, look, we're not prepared to hold on for another 12, 24 months, whatever it might be. What is the government, what's available for us?
But we've got all this debt, we can't just walk away that easily.
That's right. What's there to help me transition away from farming if they choose to? We're not talking about kicking people off their land. What we're talking about is helping them make informed decisions about the future of their business.
It's got to be their choice, but ultimately, are we going to see some parts of the country that have been farmed for generations no longer farmed?
I think there'll be always an opportunity for people that have got the right risk appetite to farm in some of those marginal areas, and that's okay. And I think that's what we want to see. If people have made the decision that it's not for them, it may well be for other people, for either a different enterprise, different sector, or it may be that they've just got different business ideas that might make that particular parcel of land more productive or more efficient than others. I think we want to leave that door wide open.
And just finally, I mean, you referred today when you were out there with the ministers again to this industry ambition, goal to get to carbon neutral by 2030. What's that going to look like, and how are you going with getting to that point?
So we've got an aspiration to be trending towards carbon neutral by 2030 as part of our roadmap for a $100 billion industry. So we've got to find an extra $40 billion in farm gate value. We set ourselves a target in the next 12 to 15 years, and part of that is an aspiration to reduce emissions, continue productivity and production to feed demand here domestically and globally. It's around working with sectors like the red meat sector who have set themselves a carbon neutral target. Red meat has been or is the biggest emitter in the agriculture sector, so they're leading the way, but other sectors are also looking at ways that they can be more sustainable, and that includes reducing emissions. So as a sector, we know that we've got to play our part, but there's also huge opportunities in the agriculture sector in terms of sequestration, and absorbing carbon and planting trees and this sort of thing. So there are opportunities for agriculture, but we have said that we as an industry need to play our part in the overall economic attention towards reducing emissions and climate change.
Tony Mahar from the National Farmers Federation. Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate that.